Hello, Agnes. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Has the music finished on your side? The music is not on here anymore.
Yes, the musicians have gone.
Oh. Yes. So we will be starting very soon. Let's see. Ah, yes, we can start now. Hello. Hello, I can see all of you now. So we are in for a very interesting time this afternoon. Before I get started to explain everything to you, I just want to mention that do not be surprised if, as participants, your mic has been muted. And if it does open by mistake, then somebody in the admin will automatically mute you unless you are officially a speaker at that time, okay? So please don't be surprised if that happens to you. Also, I just want to let you know that this is being recorded and you'll be able to access it in the future at the website. So you might want to know that also. That's interesting news as well. So let's get started. The first thing that I want to tell you is, well, hello. Greetings from Kuching, Sarawak. I am Agnes Toner, if you don't know yet, and I am a lecturer at UCSI University. I'm also a fellow in the Regional Center of Expertise in Kuching, so RCE Kuching. And that is my capacity today as I chair this meeting. So I'm going to be chairing this workshop, and the workshop is about responsible tourism and hospitality, right? Sustainable development, and the SDGs planet. Now, when I asked the speakers to come join us, I mentioned to them how I was interested in their area of expertise, and I would like them to talk about how they deal with the SDGs and also how they deal with the issue of responsible tourism. And so they will be sharing about that later today. Now, I just want to mention those of you who may not be as familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, we will be covering ones that are to some extent related to the planet. Of course, the planet, everything is related to the planet, right? But these are specifically dealing with the environment, let's say. And so we'll be covering the following SDGs. SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. SDG 7, renewable energy. SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, SDG 13, climate action, SDG 14, life below water, and then SDG 15, life on land. Now, I'm saying this, but other SDGs might be mentioned, which is fine, and it doesn't mean that every SDG must be mentioned, okay? It is very, it's like mixed together, okay? So we're concerned about sustainable development, right? And so I will let you know now we have 4 speakers. Our 4 speakers, I will tell you them in order, and you can see them right there on the screen. The first one is Miss Kamala Ernest. She will be talking to us about how she is doing a lot of work in to do with the sea and to do with plastic waste. So I'm not going to say too much about her because in a moment I'm going to talk more. I'll be introducing each speaker separately. Our second presentation will have co-presenters, and they are Dr. Daniel Karth and Dr. Felix Kemp. And these 2 men are going to be telling us a lot about dealing with this issue of sustainable tourism. And they'll be looking into a lot of, well, I've seen some of their presentations, and there are a lot of interesting things that we are going to be seeing. And then we have the third speaker, and she is locally grown. She's from Kuching, and her name is Miss Tan Pei Chin. And she will be talking to us about a specific social enterprise that is right here in Kuching and how they are connecting the issue of food waste management and the whole tourism sector and hospitality sector here in this city. So we're in for some interesting things today. All right. So now what I would like to do is I would like to give a brief introduction of Kamala, Miss Kamala, before she gives her presentation. So Kamala she is a coordinator in the Sea Circular Project, and she is dealing with reducing marine litter and managing the plastic value chain in the Southeast Asian region. Now, she is working with the United Nations Environment Program, that's UNEP. She's had 20 years of experience, and she has been working in many sectors, the private sector, government, and also the United Nations. And her focus is on sustainable development. She's worked all over the world. In fact, she at the moment is in more than one country because she is working virtually, staying in one place and working virtually in another place. But she has worked in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. And she's trying to mainstream sustainability in diverse sectors, including tourism, transport, manufacturing, oil and gas, agriculture, and in integrated waste management. Now, today, what Ms. Kamala was going to be talking to us about is titled Addressing Plastic Pollution in the Tourism Sector, Circular Economy Approaches. So I'd like to now welcome Ms. Kamala Ernest. You are free to take the stage.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, I can hear you.
Because, so I would like to share my presentation. While I'm doing that, I'm also wish to thank the organizers. All right, so let me try to. Is it okay if it's like this, to be clear? Or would you like to
see it?
Can you see the presentation?
We can. If you like, you can touch that little arrow on the right-hand side and it will make your picture bigger.
All right,
in the center here.
Full display, full screen mode.
Yeah, full screen mode, that's good. Okay. Perfect.
Minimize our pictures. All right. So yes, thank you once again for inviting the United Nations Environment Programme to this international conference. I wish to thank the organizers, especially the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Sarawak, the Faculty of Hospitality and Tourism Management, UCSI University, Sarawak Research Society, and Emerald Publishing East Asia. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. The presentation I'm going to do is on addressing plastic pollution in the tourism sector and looking at circular economy approaches. So as the Madam Chair had mentioned, I'm with the UNEP and the coordinator of Sea Circular, which I'll be talking about in my slides later. So I would speak on some trends in Asia, UNEP's Sea Circular project, and how we need to address the marine litter through plastic value chain in Southeast Asia, and also share with you a little bit on the complementary initiatives that are also helping the tourism and hospitality sector. So here is the big picture, as you can see in this graph. So in terms of the world distribution of single-use plastic producers, Asia Pacific region is topping the share with 38%. And this is quite significant, and it's also consistent with the fact that 13 of 20 top producers of plastic are also in Asia, and also proportionate to the population distribution across different regions. So from here, we can see that also the background to this figure also is that there are 78 million tons of plastic produced annually globally. And out of this 78 million tons that are going into the market, almost 70 to 80% become plastic waste, and with a very short lifetime, within a few seconds, they are used and discarded. So this is a very key issue in terms of sustainable consumption and production habits of producers as well as consumers in terms of managing plastics. So then there are also other urgent issues on why we need to tackle plastic pollutions. As Madam Chair has said, that it has links to um, tourism, and SDGs are linked to several key areas like SDGs on climate change, SDG 13, SDG 12 on responsible consumption and production. So here is to give more data on the situation on why we need to tackle plastic pollution. So each year there are additional 8 million tons of plastic that end up in the world's oceans. And what is alarming is that for the tourism sector, 80% of all tourist destinations are situated along coastal areas. So there is a major challenge in addressing sustainable tourism. Also, we find that if the trend continues, that there will be more plastics than fishes in the oceans by 2015. And as you know, also currently, without a massive change in the way plastic are produced, 99% of them are derived from fossil fuel. And maybe the future transition, instead of fossil fuel consumption or oil consumption being dominated by the transport sector or the energy sector, it would then become the plastic sector, which would be consuming a lot of oil in the future. So they are so interlinked. Pollution, biodiversity loss, climate change are so interlinked, and in the end, it will have a massive impact on the tourism sector. So we need to increase ambition and scale up action. Action has been taken, but then it is always offset by the lifestyle and consumerism and demand for plastic. Especially, we can see a trend of it increasing during COVID period, while it has an impact on tourism, but also other issues that come into has hampered the overall plastic pollution reduction efforts. Now, these are some, how can we address it? So addressing plastic pollution calls for a coordinated and collaborative actions and a collective action. So it involves consumers to adopt responsible consumption, governments to address some loopholes in the policy, and also bring enabling policy solutions uh, for the industry and also for behavioral change. Industry and entrepreneurs should innovate and ensure sustainable production, and also scale up on voluntary measures to minimize unnecessary waste, promote reuse, recycle, recover, and close the loop. This is sort of the approach to also circular economy. So here, what we present is 5 generic steps that would can be applied to any sectors, but then it takes you in a systematic approach, first by understanding your current situation in terms of understanding the importance of measuring plastic value chain in your industry. Secondly is to measure the plastic footprint, and this should be reported so that there's also a body of data that that can be collected to improve the science and knowledge on plastic footprint, and also annual reporting, just like corporate social reporting. Annual reporting on plastic footprint is equally crucial. Then once a baseline is set, then an achievable target and commitments can be made to offset the plastic consumption using various approaches. And lastly, there's also work cannot be done in silos. It should be a collaborative effort. So that's where partnering with projects, initiatives like Sea Circular, which I will be presenting in a bit, and other solution providers to look at alternative solutions to plastic consumption. Then we look at how circular economy approaches for the tourism sector can be undertaken. It's actually very simple. As in fact, in all sectors, circular economy is the way to sustainable development. It is about a closed loop system, eliminating waste from the system. If there is waste, waste is transformed as a resource. So in Africa, where I'm currently based and have been doing work before I joined the Sea Circular project, waste is considered as wealth in transition. So nothing is wasted, but then as much as possible, if waste are generated along the value chain, and it needs to be, or it should be considered as a resource and create value for it and become a raw material input for any other product. So that's just the idea of circular economy. I know definitions and perceptions can differ, but then the idea for the tourism sector here is quite simple. The solutions are within the industry. It requires mindset change. Plus, just we can address it by looking at 3 different types of interventions. First is by eliminating the use of single-use plastic, especially those which are used and thrown in use and throw plastic usage. So know the plastic footprint, which I mentioned earlier. Eliminate those unnecessary plastic items and packagings. We know everything looks, it gives a kind of a security and a hygienic feel when it's packaged, nicely wrapped, but then we need to think back and see whether it's really necessary, and and what the impacts would be for the environment, and how if these plastics are moved along the value chain. Then we also look at shifting from single use to reusable models and reusable alternatives. And there are a lot of examples in the tourism sector, especially in the hotel industry. And so there's, for examples, the bottles that are used in the bathrooms and so on. Engagement with value chain. So this is kind of important. It's a more of responsibility on where products are sourced, um, whether they are recyclable, reusable, so that once the product has an end life, that it is not going leaked in the waste system or going to the landfill. So this kind of knowledge is important, and that requires engagement with different stakeholders and suppliers, and also some investment in plastic recycling and also reporting. So this is basically how the tourism sector can apply a circular economy for the plastic. Now I like to speak about the Sea Circular very briefly. It's a project that has been ongoing since 2018. So basically, Sea Circular means addressing marine litter through the management of plastic value chain in Southeast Asia. And this project is currently being implemented by the United Nations Environment Programme, and also the Secretariat of the Coordinating Body on Seas of East Asia, which is called one of the regional seas program, which is mandated to oversee issues related to marine in the region. So, and COPSI is also being administered by UNEP and hosted by the Thai government. Sea Circular is funded by the Swedish government, and it is currently being implemented in 6 countries: in Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, Cambodia. And we have also 3 knowledge partner countries: Korea, Singapore, and China. So these partners, they contribute to enhancing the knowledge and also provide technical capacity to the work of Sea Circular in these countries. So one of the key areas that we are addressing is to inspire market-based solutions and encourage enabling policies to prevent marine plastic pollution. So what we aim to strive is for cleaner seas, less plastic wasted, and more circular economy that requires fundamental changes through the plastic value chain. So what you can see in the circle at the bottom is the plastic value chain in the plastic production, recycling, sorting, and its usage. Sea Circular contributes to 3 SDGs, which is SDG 12 on responsible consumption production, SDG 12 life below water, and also SDG 17, which is on partnerships for sustainable development. So the basic idea of Sea Circular is to address plastic pollution at source, because 80% of marine litter, uh, plastic marine litter especially, are derived from land-based sources. So here are our key interventions and how we work. Not going into the details, we have 4 different types of engagements. First is to look at market-based solutions, which is working mainly with the private sector entities, associations, to help them report on their plastic footprints, and also provide demonstration to see how waste management is addressed, material flow analysis is done, and so on. So basically, this is more of a private sector engagement kind of a component. And this is complemented by another key area, which is on policy strengthening science for informed decision making, and this is working mainly also with the COPC, which has the regional action plan on marine litter, and Sea Circular contributes to addressing marine litter from land-based sources. So that this project is also supporting governments as well as a regional framework to address marine litter, which is an important component of the project. So these two interventions are then supported by a third intervention, which is awareness raising. The results of the national work and also work at the local level are then disseminated to the wider audience through different methods. We also provide capacity development and trainings on how to implement uh, based on the policies that are developed. Then finally, also to strengthen the work, we do regional networking. And this is a very good engagement, a platform that is provided by Sea Circular for knowledge sharing and coordination among countries, which is a very important tool to ensure some sort of regional harmonization of work to address plastic pollution. So we also have other initiatives within UNEP. We have Switch Asia, which is another project with the regional office in Bangkok, and which specifically looks at packaging industry, which applies across many different sectors. And one global initiative under the One Planet network of UNEP is the Global Tourism Plastic Initiatives. So when Sea Circular works on with different sector stakeholders, for example, the tourism sector, we organize business roundtables and so on, then further support could then be complemented through these global tourism plastic initiatives. We encourage stakeholders and participants here to also look at this initiative and benefit from it. We also have campaigns like Clean Seas campaigns that anchor our work in addressing marine litter through plastic pollution. So here is just a snapshot and overview of the tools and resources that are provided for signatories who are committed to address the pollution from plastic within the tourism industry. So we have a number of products that you can also access and review. There are guidelines for tourism businesses and destinations, plastic-free toolkit for tour operators, plastic reduction guidelines, and so on. I also would like to highlight other resources that we have that can be used to support efforts made uh, by any sector to address plastic waste in terms of single-use plastic bottles, packaging, food packaging and alternatives, and also perception on plastic waste. So these are very interesting insights and data that can be used for informed decision making and taking actions and creating awareness on plastic pollution. So lastly, this is something that as an invitation to everyone, there are a number of opportunities to engage with us through the Sea Circular project. One is, of course, many of you all might know the Sea of Solutions. We have an upcoming event for this year, later this year. And this is an annual Sea Circular event. In the past two events, we had focused on mobilizing commitments by individuals, entities, private sector on reducing plastic waste. Last year was quite interesting with COVID-19. It was a hybrid event where the focus was to address how with the challenges of COVID-19. So this is just a snapshot of the event which happened last year. So please watch out for this space. We'll be informing, save the date on these events very soon. We also plan to have business roundtables to continue engagement with the private sector and inspire market-based solutions and try to address some of the challenges through discussions and sharing of experience and best practices. And lastly, also, we are coming up with a big plastic pollution campaign, a viral campaign targeted to youths to take action and also be committed to make changes and spread the word on plastic pollution. So this is my last slide. I thank you for your attention, and I've left here the website link for C Circular and also the generic email that for any further questions or any follow-up that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamala. That's all. It's really interesting, and it is so connected with the tourism industry. And the way I see it is this: the tourism and hospitality industries, they can actually be catalysts in causing more change within communities if they really grab hold of the things that you've been sharing there. Now, there have been questions, there's at least one question that's been put inside the chat. And if anybody else has any questions for Kamala, please do go ahead and type in your questions. For now, we won't be answering the questions now. We're going to leave them to the end, okay? Because now we're going to have Mr. Felix and Mr. Daniel. They are going to be sharing with us. Now, before you share, I'm going to give you a little introduction, all right? So here we go. We have got Professor Dr. Daniel Karth, if I said that right, or Kartha, or whatever. And then we also have Professor Dr. Felix Kemp, okay? So I am going to just tell you guys a bit about them before they start speaking. Well, for Dr. Daniel, he heads the research program Resource Nexus for Regions in Transition at the United Nations University's Institute for Integrated Management of Material Fluxes and of Resources. Now that's a big word, that's a lot of words. And basically, in short, it is UNU Flores, okay? Now, he also holds a professorship in environmental engineering at the German Mongolian Institute for Resources and Technology, GMIT. He's also co-affiliated to the Faculty of Environmental Sciences at Technology University Dresden, Germany. He has more than 20 years experience in research and dealing with water resource management. And this is in different parts of the world. And recently he's been working with air and soil pollution and their mitigation. He also co-chairs the Water Sustainability Commission of International Geographic Union and the Commission on Hydrology with the German Geographic Society. So a very busy man, yes? And he's very involved with many issues of sustainability. Now for Professor Dr. Felix Kemp. He is the Dean of the Faculty of Tourism and Hospitality at the IST University in Dusseldorf, Germany. He's the head of studies of 2 bachelor degree programs, tourism management and hotel and tourism marketing. So he is an expert in the field of tourism and hospitality. In his research since 2015, he's focused on tourism for all, which means travel for people with disabilities and disabled people working in tourism. Additionally, he is researching Chinese and Indian tourism to Germany and ecological sustainable tourism. He's a member of the leading German tourism research organization, two organizations, DGT and AKTF, and the Green Party in Germany. So also very much interested in sustainability issues in the field of tourism. Okay, so these are our two speakers. Now let me just tell you what they're going to be talking to us about. They are going to be presenting to us on the topic of tourism and climate sustainability, current perspectives from Germany and the United Nations. So please feel free to begin.
Well, thank you, Agnes, for hosting us here today. Thank you to your university. Thank you to the ministry. We are very glad to be here today, speaking to you and give you some impressions about sustainability from around the globe, from the direction of Germany and how we deal with it and how I teach it to my students to make them aware of the situation. So we have here some slides. I try to share those with you. I have to press which button is it? Here we go. This one it should be. And if I put that in large now, I think you should be able to see that quite decent. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So just put you to the side a little. So thank you for hosting us here today, and we will give you some introductions. At first, I will talk to you from the idea or from the side of Germany and what are aspects currently in the mind of the people. And then I hand over to my colleague Daniel, and he will give you some ideas from the UN perspective. In total, we will speak about 20 minutes and we will share that up in about half each, and questions, as I understand, we will handle on later. So at first, I want to show you, this is, I guess, a model you all know, which is about sustainability. And sometimes you've got a triangle, sometimes you've got the circles, and sometimes you've got the columns with the roof. And as it seems like in Germany, the most famous one is the one with the roof and the columns. And actually, it has changed a little and is the one that we are looking for. We are looking at the moment, mostly we say, that the ecological and the resources are the basis of all. If this is not working, the other columns can't also be sustainable or can't keep on working. And that's why, for example, the Green Party in Germany is very successful, and they are hoping to host the next chancellor in Germany. So we will have a green chancellor from September on. It might not happen, we don't know yet, because still there has to be elected, but the chances are very high at the moment, as it looks like. So this is how it's looking like. People also put a new third column to keep the house stable and called that cultural column. And what I think is quite interesting is when you look at the situation of COVID at the moment, which is with us for the last 18 months now, or 12 to 18 months, I think you can have a little impression to see that COVID is actually influencing these columns of sustainability, which are culture, social, and economical. We can't go to the theater, we can't go to the cinemas anymore, we can't meet our friends, and all the shops are closed. However, the climate change is something that is affecting more the ecological resources of our Earth and of our daily life. And this is how actually what will happen when COVID is gone. We have to really look at the model with the three columns, but with the ecological sources on the bottom as the sources for it all. Otherwise, we will rather quickly forget what we have to look at. So we should not forget the topic of the climate change, even there is COVID at the moment. I want to go with you through sustainability with the value chain of tourism. And I was thinking we should go for, we should stress the travel agencies, the tour operators, and the carriers as the major points today, and take a look how they are actually acting and what is the topics of discussions. First, we will look at the travel agencies. And there was a research of the leading German journal of tourism, which is not an academic journal, but which is the journal everybody who is involved in tourism is reading. And they have asked 123 decision makers in the travel agency areas about their opinions on sustainable travel. So maybe this is not a perfect academic research, but it gives you an impression about how the world is thinking. And even if the numbers on percentage might be not perfect, they give an idea on which way to think of. So they say that only 8% of the people were actually thinking and requesting sustainable tourism products, which is a very rather low number. And you see this research was done in the beginnings of 2020, so just 1 year ago. And we can guess that due to COVID, there has not been a lot of change in that point of thinking. They think the interest for the current product. However, what's as a sales argument? So if we would offer sustainable products, the people would buy it. It would be a sales argument. And they also want to sell more sustainable products. More than half of them want to sell those products. And more than 70% of the sales staff want to have more training, so they don't feel they have enough knowledge on sustainable tourism products. So there's overall a lack of everything related to tourism and sustainability at the moment when it comes to sales. And very interestingly, there was one statement in the questionnaire saying clients are willing to pay more on sustainable products. And you can see that only 3% totally agreed and 12% agreed. So in total, 15% of all somehow agreed. And 85% could not decide or disagreed. So there is no real request on that. Taking a look at the tour operators, you see completely, but I want to say it's a different kind of picture, but it's another way to look at it. Actually, we have an organization which is called Forum Travel Differently. That's their name. You can see the logo on the side in German called Forum Andersreisen. And it's an organization at the moment of 130 and tours free own offers. They're selling travel to all over the world. And they have agreed, and they have all to join that forum. They have signed a contract saying that they are creating long-term provable ecological travel offers in all the dimensions and all the three, which is again the ecological, the economical, and the social dimension. And they want to bring into the public, for example, on tourism fairs. So there is people that understand that we have to do something to make sustainable tourism happen, and they have agreed on. And it's not only 5 or 10 people, it's 130 companies, it's 130 tour operators. So that's really a big amount of tour operators already, but of course, they are most likely specialists, and they are not like 100 or 200 people companies. It's like 10 people's companies, 20 people's companies, something like that, to give you an impression. That would be the major of the companies. 2 of those are Nomad and Chameleon. And in a report, it was said that, for example, and this might be interesting to Kamala, Nomad says, we eliminated all disposable plastics. So no cutlery anymore on the airlines, no single packaging of butter or jam at breakfast, no PET or plastic bottles on excursions. It seems little, but they're doing something and they want to change something. So they are not booking an airline which is offering disposable cutlery. You will just fly on another airline. That's the idea how they want to bring that into action. Chameleon, on the other hand, hands out, for example, some what they call a nature bottle, a bottle of nature, which you can refill during all your trip. And this saved already for this little tour operator, or this not so little, it's a rather big one, 615,000 bottles, which was in total approximately 22 tons of plastic in the last year, which is a first step to make people also aware while you're on the travel. Why do I have a plastic bottle at home if I don't have that on a trip? So people might recognize that and coming home and change their habits. Also, they buy 100 square meters of rainforest per client, which equals to approximately 5.3 tons of CO2, which is approximately one travel. So we know For example, one intercontinental flight return ticket economy, normally on a 10 hours flight, equals to approximately 4 tons of CO2. And that's what they buy the rainforest for. And they're planting trees on their trips with their clients. In 2019, this was approximately 8,000 trees. We all know that just planting trees is not the solution, but it is just a step. It's something they are doing, and it's better to do than to talk. And this is the good thing we can see here. On the other hand, we have TUI. TUI is said to be the biggest or the largest tour operator in the world. That's what they always claim. I don't know if companies like Sea Trips are as big or not, and it also depends from a business perspective. Do you compare numbers of clients, turnover, earnings, or whatever? But let's say they're the biggest in Europe, at least for guaranteed. And if you look at their annual report, you can see they've have this sentence, which I translated into English. If TUI Group does not achieve its sustainable goals, and if at the same time the goals of the UN Climate Conference in Paris of 2015 are not achieved, this could have a long-lasting influence on our now, future, and target markets. In results, this could have a high negative effects on the demand of our services and products. So they see that actually they are digging their own grave if they keep on going like they do. That's what they see. Let's see what they do on the next slide. But before that, I just want to show you, because we're going over to carriers soon, 81.5% in 2015 of their CO2 emissions was the flights. 10% approximately was the cruises, and 8% the hotels. But you see, the major thing in tourism is the transport. If it is by air or by ship, should be neglected, but the major thing is the airlines. So what they said for TUI is the target was last year, we commit to operate Europe's most emission efficient airline by 2020. And I only found this little slide about from the BBC, which was saying EasyJet in 2020 was the most efficient CO2 efficient airline in the world. And I can't see anywhere near TUI on that list at all. Of course, later on, they will tell this was not our fault, it was COVID, as all of those will tell later when they've not achieved their targets this year. And also what is interesting is the point of greenwashing. What they say in their report, they say the CO2 intensity for our business will be reduced by 10%. But you have to learn, what does this term CO2 intensity mean? This means if the CO2 emissions are increasing because their business is increasing, because they're having more customers, then their CO2 is increasing, and of this increase, they will reduce by 10%. They will not reduce from 10% from, let's say, 2020 or 2019, the year before. They will reduce in relation to the growth of business. And this is what I call the greenwashing. Saying something nice, but don't think it's going to happen. So before I have to hand over, let's quickly go to the carriers. I just want to give you the idea that actually airplanes have sum up to have almost 3% of the worldwide CO2 emission, which is already measurable because it's 3%. You can get it down in numbers. It's on the list. And if you see that, I'm on the right side of my slide now, only 5% of humans have ever been on an airplane. I just ask you, what shall we do whenever more people are going on an airplane? This is a mess. It's just, we can give up on thinking about how to reduce all this. There's a lot of things we have to think about how to travel better than on airplanes with fuel. And just to get that back to tourism, 5% of the human-made CO2 emissions are caused by tourism. And of this 5%, 75% are caused by touristic transport, which 40% is air travel and 32% is motorized travel. So just to give you the numbers, to bring our people from A to B in tourism is the major CO2 problem of tourism industry. And you could compensate all that flights. And Germans are said to be, they have compensated, I'm on the right side of the slide, 18%. But in truth, Lufthansa says only 1 to 2% have compensated while booking online. So people have paid for the compensation of their CO2. And this 1 to 2% is very closely fitting to the 3%, which we heard about the travel agencies earlier, till people that are very much willing to pay for sustainable tourism. And as you can see here on the left side, 27% of the people don't have any shames of flying, but 41% of the Germans already have a shame of flying because of the CO2 emissions. And just let me, before I hand over, to show you some report of a German magazine, which is funded by the German government and which is doing kind of academic research, but is putting that into a public paper so everybody can read and buy it at every normal newspaper shop. And they have calculated the CO2 equivalence, so all the CO2, including all the other things that could be transferred into CO2 of a classic journey for going skiing of a German couple, which would mean they would per person use about 700 kilos of CO2. However, if they use an eco-friendly hotel and go there by train instead of by car, they will only use half of the emissions. A second trip they've done was, and this is very interesting, was a trip from Germany to Italy, to the island of Sardinia. The people were almost using 2 tons of CO2, which is, if you all know the numbers, what we are allowed to use per person per year in the near future. So they've used that already in 1 week of holiday. And when people are going to Sardinia by mobile home, the interesting thing is it doesn't really matter if they're flying 800 kilometers or if they're going by car or by mobile home for 800 kilometers. The CO2 emissions is the same. However, what you can see here, if you're doing the camping and if you don't do any water sports with a motor jet ski or something, then you can reduce by 50% your CO2 emissions for that holiday. And the last sample would be an international travel from Germany to Thailand. And there you can see the big thing is the flight, which is about 5 tons of CO2 emissions. 4,800, it doesn't matter if you go on an eco-friendly trip or not. If you're flying, it's always the same. This is economy class, but the hotel itself and has a lot of more emissions because of the wellness, because of the breakfast buffet. This is what it takes. This is where the CO2 emissions come from. And this is my last slide before I hand over to Daniel. The solutions are long-haul flights should be done with awareness and only for 3 years. You should do direct flights and avoid stopovers, because that means another 20% of emissions. And the payment of compensation should be included in the prices. Otherwise, people will not compensate. They also found what I just showed you with the other slides. Okay, they said you should not go for the hotel, you should go for camping. That's not everybody's story, but that of course would be the best for the environment. And you should avoid hotels with air conditionings, wellness and spa areas. And you should have regional food and ingredients. And you should avoid energy intensive activities outside. And in the end, they also agreed no tourism is not a solution, as it is income in tourism is used for environmental protection. And this is what I wanted to show you, which is at the moment talked about in Germany. And I'm very proud now to hand over to my colleague Daniel that he can show you the other slides. And Daniel, I will keep on clicking. Just tell me every time you need a new slide, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Felix. I will now speak about the international situation, and I will start with the role of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, which is in a kind of challenge to make tourism accessible and sustainable at the same time. And the World Tourism Organization is mandated with the promotion of tourism, namely the promotion of responsible and sustainable tourism on the one hand, but also the promotion of universally accessible tourism. And as you heard in the presentation of my colleague, there is a very large number of people who have actually never stepped on an airplane, who have never spent a holiday abroad. The goal of UNWTO is to actually increase the share of people who could in the future travel. Click, please. So responsible and sustainable travel on the one hand means aiming at stable and healthy ecosystems. Universally accessible means allowing everyone to travel, irrespective of the person's nationality, the income, the health or disability of a person, the gender of the person. And in the end, universally accessible tourism would in the end result in a growth in global tourism. click, please. So in the end, this would mean that there is a conflicting interest, and supporting socioeconomic development, that was too fast, I'm sorry. So in the end, supporting socioeconomic development, which is another part of sustainability, would in the traditional interpretation also lead to growth in tourism. So responsible and sustainable on the one hand has positive environmental goals, but when seen in a socioeconomic perspective, a growth in tourism, of course, always creates a challenge between ecological sustainability and an economic growth. Next slide, please. So in this slide, you can see the impact of COVID-19 on international tourism. And you can see no matter which region in the world you're looking at, there are very sharp declines of at least more than 60%, and in some regions even exceeding 80% and more reductions in incoming international travelers. And this is more than we have ever seen in recent history. So even if we compare it, for example, to the impact of the September 11th attacks in the United States, the impact was far less and it was far more short-lived. Now we have seen for already close to 18 months a very substantial reduction in international tourism. One click, please. So all in all, this led to a 60% reduction in the carbon dioxide emissions from tourism. So the reduction in terms of numbers were not fully reflected by the reductions in tourism numbers. Now, if we look at the impact of COVID-19 in a medium and in a long term, there can be different scenarios. And one scenario is a rapid return to business as usual. And of course, it's understandable that in the tourism industry, there is a desire to compensate for the lost revenue that has been happening for several months. And hotel beds have been empty, airlines had immense costs, but no revenue. So there is definitely the wish to get back to a situation close to what was there before. But on the other hand, COVID-19 could also be seen as an opportunity for a more sustainable form of tourism in the future and a resilient recovery of tourism. And that would also include degrowth. So full sustainability is not possible if we decide that tourism should continue growing in the future. The positive effects could potentially be reinforced, at least temporarily, by some concerns on the side of customers, namely concerns about health and hygiene, which could lead to a preference for short-haul versus long-haul trips. So if people make shorter trips, that would mean much lower emissions. As you heard, it's typically the long-distance trips by airplane, which are the dominant sources of emission. And it could also lead, at least temporarily, to a reduction in all over travel activities. So COVID-19 does have a positive environmental impact. Now, if we look further into the future, the question is, when we look at sustainable tourism, is it sufficient to look at the topic of the climate footprint of tourism? And I would clearly say no, it's not sufficient. There is far more to our environment than only climate. And we saw that, yes, the emissions are immense, and tourism sector is already contributing in a measurable way to the global CO2 emissions, but it's also contributing in a significant way, for example, to soil degradation. When we look at erosion in ski areas where people have a negative impact on the land, it could lead to the establishment of tourist infrastructures, new roads being built, hotels being built, tourist infrastructures being set up that compete with, for example, natural areas in terms of land use. So there can be negative impacts. However, these impacts can also be positive. Tourism can be a driver of sustainability, and tourism regions very often live from selling the impression of an attractive and intact environment at the site of the destination. So tourism contributes to wildlife conservation, it contributes to afforestation. So if we look at it in this way, we come to a resource nexus perspective, and you can now slowly see that in the picture on the right side, different logos are popping up. We had climate with the SDGs 13 of climate action. We have, for example, water and the biosphere. Please go back, Felix, to we have clean water and sanitation. We have life below water as the two water-related SDGs. We have life on land when it comes to the linkages of land and the biosphere as two sectors of the resource nexus. We have clean and affordable energy at the bottom of this picture, SDG 7. And I've allowed myself, Agnes, to actually include two more SDGs in the list of planetary SDGs, namely sustainable cities and communities. So tourism often leads to a sort of temporary community being established at a tourist destination. We have responsible consumption and production, which are also strongly related to tourism and the environment. So in the end, it's not only climate, but there are many more aspects to be looked at. Now, if we decide to reduce tourism towards zero, yes, this would be positive, maybe from a viewpoint of climate action, but it could also reduce the positive development impacts from the tourism sector, including positive impacts for the so-called planetary SDGs. And as I have shown here, the climate action is in brackets because more tourism is very, very difficult to align with climate action. Yes, we can compensate emissions, but whenever we travel, we always create emissions. And in the short-term future, it's not very realistic to assume that we can develop at a large scale forms of tourism that would cause zero net CO2 emissions. But when we look at many of the other goals, at least at regional levels, in regions where we have a high share of ecotourism and sustainable tourism, tourism can very well contribute to positive environmental developments. Next click, please. So the question is, what are the alternatives? And one alternative that we could think of is, for example, virtual tourism. But we should actually be aware that even if we conduct tourism online and people, for example, use video screening or other forms of virtual reality, that this is creating significant emissions. We are now all meeting online via Zoom, and for all of us who are using the camera, we are using a lot of bandwidth, and this in the end requires resources. It requires computing capacities to maintain the internet. So if one person uses video streaming for 1 hour, this has the equivalent of about 5 kilowatt hours, or if we look at the German energy mix, 2.5 kilograms of CO2 emissions. And if we look at large numbers of people doing it, we can see that virtual tourism is not the solution. It can help maybe if we look at short-term trips over long distances, it's better to do it virtually. But if we look at shorter distances and long video conferencing, in the end, the footprint of online meetings could be even worse than in-person meetings. And we should also remember that when we look at virtual tourism, yes, it might have fewer negative impacts, particularly if compared to long distance trips by air. But it would also have much weaker positive effects for sustainable regional development, for both the planetary SDGs, but of course also for the more society-oriented SDGs. So in the end, we can state that, yes, there is a need for more sustainable tourism development in the future. But even from an environmental perspective, I would say that no tourism is also not the solution to look for in the future. And with that, Felix, you can do a last click, and you can later on see our contact information. If you look at these slides, please feel free to contact us if you have any questions even beyond this specific conference. It was our pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you very much for organizing this important session. And I think you have now already received some very interesting viewpoints, starting with the important topic of plastic, which is also very often used in tourism activities. We have addressed now the issues of tourism and climate sustainability, but also seen that, yes, there is a strong climate footprint, but limiting the viewpoint to climate only is also not sufficient. We must really look at all the different impacts tourism has, and we will even hear more in a next presentation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. So that was a very good summary of your presentation and Kamala's as well. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to remind all of our participants, please, if you have any questions for Dr. Daniel and Dr. Felix, please do put them into the chat box. And if we have time for a question and answer session, I will be picking some of them out for us to ask them, okay? Now let's move on to our third speaker. Our third speaker is Ms. Tan Pei Chin. And there she is, okay. And Ms. Tan Pei Chin is a local lady, at least I think she's local. She lives in Kuching, and she is part of a social enterprise that is called Warming Up. Now, I know when you hear me, you might be thinking of, you know, warming up before you exercise, but it's not warm up. It's not W-A-R-M. It's W-O-R-M, warming up, because among the different things that they are doing, they have a worm farm, and they teach people about composting and all sorts of other things. And they teach about how to manage food waste. So that's where they got the name Warming Up. And it's a very interesting company that I have had the pleasure of working with in the past and hopefully in the future as well. So Pei Chin, I'm just going to introduce you, mention a few things, and then I will pass the mic to you, okay? All right, so Pei Chin, she has a biotechnology background. She has a master's degree that is specialized in entomology, and specifically on insects as organic waste composting biotools. She has 4 years experience in insect composting in Mauritius, China, and Malaysia. And for the past 6 years, she has had experience in putting together and doing green projects. So some of these projects include dealing with waste segregation and awareness within the community of waste segregation and the management of waste, food waste from hawkers. Now, I don't know, the international people here might know, you might not know what hawkers are. They are like food stalls, you know, where they set up, they might set up on the side of the road, or they set up under a big, almost like a canopy, and there are many hawkers under the same roof, and they each have their own little portable food stations. And so they have had some projects where they manage, they help the hawkers to manage food waste, and they also have dealt with, or she has dealt with, sustainable farming with farmers, educational workshops, talks, and community engagements. And so there are a lot of practical examples that she is going to be showing us. Her talk is her talk is about all the different things that Warming Up is doing, and they are very closely linked with the tourism industry right here in Kuching. And so you might get a lot of ideas. I'm hoping you'll get a lot of ideas of what you can do in your cities and how you can help with the food waste issues that are happening in the hospitality and tourism industry. Okay, Pei Chin, I give the mic to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Agnes. Yeah, so I will share the screen. Yeah.
It can be seen.
Okay, thank you. So thank you so much for the invitation for Warming Up to present in this international conference. So today I will be presenting the topic related to sustainable waste management, which is actually under an initiative by our Ministry of Tourism, Art and Culture, Sarawak. The title is Responsible Tourism Initiative. So under this initiative, we actually like briefing the local community with some like sustainable waste management project. So before that, I will do some introduction about our organization. So basically what we do, just like just now Madam Agnes mentioned, we are doing the organic waste collection and management services. So mainly is collecting the organic waste and do the treatments in order to prevent the organic waste go into the landfill. So second is we're doing the educational workshop, which we engage and work closely with the local communities in order to run the like awareness campaign to like together to go beyond the green initiative. And lastly is the sustainable farming. So sustainable farming is like we encourage the farming without the like less pesticide chemicals and use the natural composting, those kind of thing with the local farmers. So for the sustainable waste management, um, as an introduction, usually this is what we will brief and also educate with our local community, which we usually will involve and cover the plastic waste, paper waste, metal waste, lead acid, and also the electronic waste. So for the plastic waste, this is some of the infographic that we would like to sharing with all of the guests here. So this is the one that usually will brief with the local community. So for the plastic waste, like here we have code 1 until 7. So for your information, actually the plastic usually we will ask the local community to try to identify the code. So usually the code can be found underneath the bottles. Like code 1 is usually the plastic bottle, and code 2 is usually the one like milk jar or the detergent bottle. So the community will have to differentiate and also like segregate the plastic waste accordingly according to their code. So this one is the code 5. So here mentioned code 1, 2, and 5 is because in Malaysia, usually this is the code 1, 2, and 5 is the code that can be recycling in our local city here. So what we encourage them is like also is this one is like quite normally found in like homestay, hotels, and also house. Yeah. So we will suggest them with some of the method like they can doing the eco bridge, which they have the plastic bottle, they have the plastic bag. So this plastic bag actually can fit into the bottles and until full. And this plastic bottle that fill with plastic bag actually can be very like strong and can use as the gardening structures and also like building as well as like some decoration. Yeah. So for the pepper ware segregation, we will usually share with the community is like they have the cardboard, all newspaper, A4 paper, and egg carton. So they will like segregate the waste accordingly. And one more thing that I would like to mention here is like the Tetra Pak packaging. Usually we encourage the homestay or the local tourist sector to choose the packaging with Tetra Pak, which is more environmental friendly. And for the pepper waste, actually, we want them to like avoid the non-oily and non-food stand because usually this kind of pepper is like hard to upcycling. So next is the metal waste segregation, which this is quite commonly in practice in our country, the aluminium waste and other metal waste. For the organic waste segregation, this is the infographic and label that usually we will provide it to our stakeholder or any like community, so they can refer to this organic waste segregation infographic to segregate their waste. So as you can see here, like the thing that can throw in is always like the organic best waste, and the things that cannot throw in is the non-organic waste. So other than that, the organic waste that we mentioned here also include the used oil, which the used cooking oil can actually be making into the soap. And here are some of the diagram that show that how actually we treat the waste that we collected, particularly for the organic waste. So once we collecting the organic waste, which including the used cooking oil, for the organic waste, usually we will doing the bioenzyme composting, which involve the high fibrous waste. And second is like the insect composting, which this one is the black sugar fly maggots composting. And lastly is the saponification, which using the used cooking oil and make into the soap. So these are the photo of the black sugar fly maggots, which is at the prepupa stage. And this is the adult fly of the black sugar fly. So this, what's so special about this insect is because they are actually non-pests as compared to like the housefly, and these creatures actually can help in compose the organic waste. And after they consume the organic waste, they can actually grow out their body protein, and this protein actually can be like recycled back, become the animal feed of the animals. Yeah, so it's kind of like the biodegradation process in order to treat the organic waste. So for this black sugar fly, they actually can consume a various type of the waste. For example, like the leftover food from the consumer plates, the high fibrous fruit waste, like the durian peel, coconut peels, sugar cane peels, and even like the sewage, the slurry sewage, and as well as the chicken or the others livestock dung. So there are high reduction efficiency. Usually is 1 kilo of food waste with 1 kilo of the maggots, and they actually can be done the composting in one day. So some of the pictures are showing that how our routines for the transportation and process at our plant site, and some of the photos showing the greenhouse, which the place that we rear the black sugar fly in order to do the composting. Yeah, so the second part of our presentation will be focused on the execution part, which we have the project, which is the Responsible Tourism Initiative with the Sarawak Tourism Board and Ministry. So for this project, we're actually covering hotels, restaurant, as well as the homestay. So the second part will be covering for the hotel and restaurant. So these are the responsible tourism partners locally in Kuching, Sarawak, which including the UCSI as well, yeah, hotels and university. So for all these partners, they actually collaborate with us on in the organic waste collection and management project. So usually what we will do is we will do the initiate the project with the launching, Yeah, and after that, we will do the educational awareness and briefing to the kitchen staff, and showing that the infographic of how to segregate the waste properly, and also like why they need to do so. So after the briefing, we will send the bins, which you can see here, the usual bin that usually we will send to the hotel for the segregation as well as the gathering, and some educational pamphlet. For the organic waste source collection, usually there are two parts. The first part, the food waste will come from the consumer plate, which after the consumption of the customer. So this one usually will be gathered by the cleaner into a bins. And after that, the cleaner will bring the bin to the bull barrier, which is at the collection site, which can be accessed by the vehicle. So after our men will usually go daily for the collection and do the weighing, verifying, and collection. So for the second part of the organic waste source is actually from the kitchen, which usually like the fish offal, the fruit peels, all those inedibles food waste. So we will also gather, and we'll also like educate the cleaner to gather it's in a bin, and the same process into the collection point and do the weighing, verify, and collection. So after the collection, we will send to our plant and we'll do the dewatering and secondary sorting, because somehow there are some like mixing of the non-organic waste like the chopstick, straw, or this kind of non-organic waste. So after the secondary sorting, we will do the desizing to increase the surface area of the food waste, like in order for the insect to consume the food more efficiently. Yeah. So some of the high fibrous waste we will do using the compost method, which is the high fibrous waste using the bioenzyme composting. And some use oil because we can't, like the insect is actually, they can consume the oil, but it's not like the entirely is oil. Yeah. So for the oil, usually we'll use the saponification method. These are the data showing that in 2019, the organic waste collection data from hotels. So averagely, there are around 4 tons to 8 tons of the organic waste will be collected from the hotel sector. While for the restaurant, in average is around 200, 400 and to 1,000 kilograms of the waste collected per month. So the the third part of the presentation will be focused on the local homestay, which is the sustainable waste management with the local community, local homestay. So these are some of the examples that we propose to our local community to improve their green initiative at their homestay or at their areas. So for examples, like promote the green transport using the hydrogen bus, which introduced by our Sarawak governments, and bamboo bicycle. They can build their own bamboo bicycle because the bamboo resources is plenty in their area. And second is like the waste segregation station at the homestay. They can guide the tourists as well as they themselves and the villagers to do the segregation properly. And like the other example is like locally made handicraft, like the eco soap that I mentioned just now, using the used cooking oil to make into the soap. And this soap actually can become like a gift for the tourists. And next one is the green landscape. The plants that we propose here is the soap nut. Soap nut is actually a tree, and this tree is actually they can produce this soap nut. So soap nut is like a natural detergent that can be used to replace the chemical detergents. So it's a natural products in order to promote the green initiative. And lastly, here we have the upcycling of the plastic waste from the homestay into the usable product. For example, like the plastic bottles or plastic bags or other plastic product actually can be crushed using the plastic machine, the crusher, and then put into the plastic injector machine. And then after that, it will come out. It's like a process of melting the plastic lah, and the end product can be anything as long as we have the mold. So like for example, here is the coaster, the keychain, or any other shape as long as we have the mold. And for the homestay, for the execution part, actually we are distributing the hygiene essential kit packaging to our local community at the homestay there. So what we distribute is the soap bar, the soap nut, and the hand sanitizer. So we for this soap nut, like just now mentioned, it can be used to replace the detergents to do the laundry or do the washing. And for this project, we involve around 10 homestay at the first one, which is last year, 2000. And for the second phase is also last year, end of last year, December, involved 13 village all over Sarawak. So for the project, we prepare our hygiene set all by our local community as well, as we support the manpower from the local communities. And during the execution day, usually we will deliver the awareness in terms of waste segregation, as well as doing the workshop for the soap making. So we will guide the local community on the waste segregation infographic informations, like just now mentioned. And afterward, we will proceed with the workshop, which we guide the community to do the soap by themselves. So these are the part of the information that usually we will share with the local community, like how to do the soap using the sodium hydroxide is one of the material ingredients, and to mix it and mix with the used oil in order to make into the soap. It's a co-process soap making process. And these are some pictures showing the project execution day and the local community, which they learn on how to do the soap making. And one more point here is the equipments and tools that we use for the project is actually we try to minimize the waste produced, which we usually use the container. It's like the plastic bottle. We will use the one that we collected from the hotels, the single-use plastic bottles, and use as the container. And like the bowl, we were using it repeat and repeat. Yeah. So these are some of the finished product pictures done by the local homestay, and some of the hygiene set kits distribution pictures. Yeah, so that's all from us. Thank you so much for provide us the opportunity to share on our initiative in Kuching, Sarawak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pei Chin. And I always find it very interesting to see some practical application of repurposing, right? Or what you guys call upcycling waste products, right? Yeah. So I wanted to make a comment for the international audience. They might not know what homestays are. Homestay is the term we use for, it's almost like bed and breakfast, but it's usually in rural or very traditional villages where the people that go and visit there as tourists, they can stay at a home. That's why it's called homestay. They stay at someone's home and they experience the traditional life. And so what Pei Chin is doing with the warming up is that they are teaching, they are training these homestay owners to develop these sustainable practices. So they're doing the waste management, and they are using, like say they cook with oil, they're using the used cooking oil to make soap, and then the soap can be used there also. So it's very interesting. It's very practical. Thank you very much, Pei Chin. Okay, so I will remind everyone that you should be typing out any questions you have for Pei Chin now as well, because in a moment, I will be doing the question and answering session. So Pei Chin, can you unshare your screen? Thanks a lot. Okay, hello everybody again. And let's start with, I have a few questions. I will So while I deal with questions from the first two groups, I will basically ask the questions that I already have for the first, for Kamala, okay? While I'm waiting. All right, so Kamala, let's see. There is a question from Nepal. And the question is, does Sea Circular have any programs of plastic eradication in Nepal?
Thank you, Ms. Agnes. I saw the question,
Mhm.
and I also saw our counterpart, Ms. Jacqueline, answered.
She answered it. Okay, but you can answer a bit too.
Yes. So there are initiatives by WWF on addressing plastic waste in Nepal. But for Sea Circular, as I mentioned earlier, in the current phase, we are working in 6 countries. So Nepal is not one of them, but perhaps we will consider that in the next phase, if there is.
So I didn't realize that those 6 countries at the moment are the only countries. Ah, okay, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yeah. So I guess for in terms of the person that asked from Nepal, you have to try WWF to find information about that, about plastic eradication. Okay, so I'm just going to go along with each presenter and then see if we can do a second round, okay? So now I'm going to ask, I've got a question for Felix, and this is from a person from the Philippines. And the question was, do you have any perspectives or ideas on how the tourism industry in the tropics can address the issue of high energy consumption caused by air conditioning?
Well, I was seeing that question earlier already in the chat, and I think it's a very good question. Thank you for having that for me. It just goes into the direction, especially when the climate will, when the temperature on Earth will even increase a little more, and we know that if the climate change is coming, it will be even more unpleasant. And the question is, of course, people will think we need air conditionings. And the first question I have is, why should people travel there if you can't live there? What is the point of going there? I mean, that's a little harsh, but that's the first question I want to address. But let's get to the point to say, yes, we want to attract tourism because it makes sense to have tourism. And as Daniel also said, tourism is helping and could support the region by giving jobs and by helping getting the whole world more sustainable. The thing is, who is your target group? Who are you aiming at? Are you aiming at the person who is only willing to come to a highly air-conditioned hotel down to, let's say, 20 degrees Celsius per room? Or are you willing to have a niche market of people that are really interested to get the feeling of the scenery, to get the feeling of the earth on this place? And then these people would accept and would prepare. I mean, not everybody has to go to see penguins, and not everybody has to see icebergs in his life to get happy. And we don't have to make this only in the very most comfortable way, accessible for all of us. We have to see who is our market. And if we are approaching this, there's enough people always willing to pay something. And I think they will also pay enough of the money to come to your place, maybe if this is even in the Philippines, to your place, and will not request a fully air-conditioned room. I mean, there might be options to have one air-conditioned room, but sleeping in a normal room, something like this. I think that's the way we have to think about it in the future. Think about target markets and think about what is the price sensitivity of those people who are willing to come and who are willing to get the real experience and not just have a 5-star holiday, which you can have basically. I mean, I don't want to mention any of these hotel groups because I don't want to make any advertisements, but you know, all these American hotel groups, you can build such a hotel everywhere and you can put an air conditioning everywhere. But why should I go there to see this? Why do I need this somewhere where it's 50 degrees? Am I the correct tourist for this destination? Question mark. That's how I would answer that question.
I would like to add something to it. As I traveled to the Philippines previously, of course, the first question as a tourist coming from Germany, I need to ask myself, how can I reduce the footprint of my of my trip by air? This is the first question, because this is what matters most. The air conditioning in the hotel will, in the end, have a relatively small share as compared to the long distance flight. So I should reduce this footprint. If I opt for an air-conditioned hotel, I need to ask myself, is it sufficient to reduce the room temperature to 25 degrees, or do I want 16 degrees? And I remember once traveling in the Philippines, I was on a bus and it was cooled down to 16 degrees and it felt just horribly cold. And I was thinking, oh, I have gone to a tropical country because I like to enjoy the warmth and actually not being stuck in a too strongly air-conditioned place. There is the question of the efficiency of air conditioners. So it makes a 50% difference roughly between the most energy efficient models as compared to the least energy efficient ones. There are alternative technologies if we want to cool down rooms. So we can use, for example, geothermal cooling techniques by pumping water into the ground where it is cooled down to a temperature of, let's say, 15 degrees, and then it will cool down our room. Maybe not as much as an air conditioner, but it does help very much to make things more bearable. So there are definitely many different ways of addressing the challenge. And of course, it's, as Felix mentioned, the question of the space that we are air conditioning. It's better to air condition a small room rather than a very large suite in a hotel where maybe 2 people are staying and air conditioning 100 square meters of space. So the question is not always to reduce it to zero, but everyone can think about ways of at least reducing it in ways that does not so much affect their personal comfort.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, now one moment, please. Now I have a question for Pei Chin. Pei Chin, has Warming Up considered doing different projects in other cities besides Kuching?
Yeah, yes. So for because for the past 6 years actually we are more less in Kuching Sarawak, so we are thinking of expanding our impacts to other city as well. Yeah, that one is under our consideration. Like last time we do in Kuching, but these few years we actually more expand to the more city in Sarawak, and sooner or later we will expand to Peninsula Malaysia. Yeah. So as long as the manpowers and we are building the sustainable models that which we can replicate and duplicate to other city as well. Yeah.
That's great. Another thought that came to me is perhaps you can consider producing educational material that can be used by other groups.
Yeah, because like currently the COVID pandemic also. So actually we are also working on like doing the video documentations on what like the workshop, because if you guys are interested, you can go to our Warming Up YouTube channel. Actually we have done some videos on how to like doing the insect composting in details, how to execute it, and like how to use the biological control agents, the BCA, to like replacing the chemicals using the insects to control the pests. Yeah, something information like this. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, let's see now. I'm going to ask Kamala one more question now. And my question for Kamala is, in terms of the Sea Circular program that you have started, right, not just you, of course, that you and the whole team have started, have you guys seen any positive results yet?
Yes, thank you for the question. Um, There are a lot of ground activities that have been implemented. For example, um, in Malaysia, there is also a roadmap for zero waste plastic, single-use plastic roadmap that is in place.
Yeah.
And through the Sea Circular project, we have helped the government develop also a national action plan on marine litter pollution. So the draft is ready, and we hope that once it's cleared by the respective ministry, it will be launched. That's on the policy side. We also, at the regional level, through the COPSI work, there are a number of national marine litter action plans that are already in place in these countries to address plastic pollution, marine plastic pollution. So that's on the policy side. And on the private sector engagement side, yes, there are a lot of commitments by the private sector. What we're trying to do now is to bring out those case studies on how they how they committed and actions that was taken and the results that are achieved. These are the documentation process that are ongoing, and we hope to publish this. And there's a lack of such outreach activity at the moment that we are trying to scale up. So there are a number of case studies that we have from the projects that are being implemented in countries. Another positive thing is the number of stakeholders who have participated in the online training on marine litter. We had more than 9,000, maybe about 5,000 participants. So that's a huge uptake for the region, and now we are even having those trainings in different languages, and so on. So we are building the momentum. Of course, there's lots much to do, and a lot of work need to be outreached from the project. So awareness raising is there. We can see through the Sea of Solutions activities, and we are now monitoring to see and then share the results.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I'm going to ask Dr. Felix and Dr. Daniel. It's a question that addresses both of you. Okay, here goes. Are there any research initiatives or projects regarding green energy production at the regional or national level in Germany or in UNU Flores to deal with the issue where you've been mentioning about energy consumption, about using fossil fuels, right? Are there any green initiatives? Are there any things in the pipeline or even things that have started where people are like entire energy producing plants are converting to green energy solutions rather than using fossil fuels? Is that happening at all in UNU or in Germany?
Well,
It
I
is
can speak
happening, yes.
on the German perspective, but Daniel, you go first, ne?
So at UNU, we look at Germany and abroad, of course. And when we look at Germany, our national government has decided to phase out coal by 2038. And we do have regions in Germany where today, for example, we still very heavily depend on coal, like coal mining regions with heavy industry. And these regions are now really changing their face, that we are phasing out coal in some of the regions. This has already happened, and we need alternative energy sources because people continue to consume energy. And in some cases, we have, for example, decided to flood the former open cast coal mines and create artificial lakes to attract tourists to these regions. And the plans are that in the future, the energy supply will be 100% green. We are not there yet, that's for sure. but plans are that within the next 20 years, when we look at electricity, we are definitely 100% green. There will be other forms of energy consumption, of course, for mobility and other sources, but also we see that the transition to electric mobility is on its way. So there are at least encouraging signs that energy consumption, including energy consumption in tourism, will be decreasing in the future.
Well, let me put that into a touristic perspective additionally, because what you should know is that Europe as is in one way different to all the other continents. It's very small, and the countries are very closely linked together. That's why we have the European Union. And still every country has its own airline and its own regional flights. But if you want to travel in Europe, as we also don't have so much water, like for example, if you look at Asia, what they now want to reactivate is the night trains. So for example, we had a lot of night trains before we had a lot of flights because flying was very expensive, let's say until the 80s. And this all decreased over the last 2, 3, 4 decades. And now we realize that night trains are one of our big solutions. And they found an initiative. You can go by night train now very soon from Berlin to Paris, or from Berlin to Rome, or whichever you name. That's one of the targets. So you can see, for example, at the moment already, it takes you from Cologne, which is in the west of Germany, to Lisbon, which is on the very west of Europe, 24 hours by train. And this includes one night train from the Spanish border through Spain into Portugal, which is also, I think, was a movie and a big book, Night Train to Lisbon. One of you might know it, but this train is really existing. And we are trying to improve that. The second thing what we are doing is, we had the thing, and I guess this was the same all over the world with the national flight carriers, with the airlines, they all almost got bankrupt. So they got credits from the government. The German Lufthansa, the German national carrier, got a credit, and the French Air France from France got a credit. And here you can see what I like very much better on the French side than on the German side. The German just got a credit and could keep on working. The French got a credit. However, there were two things they had to fulfill. The first thing they had to fulfill is they had to stop the inner French flights in the near future, which means they are forbidden. This makes also sense because the French rail network is way better than the German rail network. This also comes from the point that France is very much centralized to Paris. In Germany, at the moment, this is not possible. So we want to change that in Germany. That was one of the things they had to do to get a credit to survive. And the second thing is, you know that the company of Airbus, which is the counterpart to Boeing, was actually founded by the European governments. And in the lead, it was the French and the German government. So the Airbus machines are mainly produced in Germany and France. And Airbus now has to develop an airplane which is going on H2 only, or on e-fuels only. And this is the ones that are actually working only on the short and medium haul. So what is already can be said that in the near future of up to 10, 15 years, there will be still always long haul flights using petrol or kerosene. And on the short haul, we have to get new airplanes. And also we have to see how airplanes will change, how many people fit into an airplane. When you think about airplane history, airplanes are always called flying cigars because they're all like a tunnel with wings. But the question is, why has that to be? So we are looking for producing new ways of airlines looking differently to fit in more people and have less flights. So this was the ideas we had, and this is what Germany and France and Europe are doing at the moment from a touristic kind of perspective. And just to let you know, and something to think about for your own country, does it make sense to think about night trains and improved train connections within your country? Yes, of course, it might be easier to travel, let's say, from Munich to Frankfurt by train. than to fly if the flights do not exist anymore. It's possible for all the German clients. But what do you do if you arrive from New York City or Beijing? And you arrive in Frankfurt and you have to go to Munich. And there is no connecting flight anymore, and the train system is not working like in France. And this is the major problem that makes the country of Germany economically to rely on inner German flights. This is the point of topic, that our train network is not organized to be a substitute for inner German flights. Whereas in France, it's organized like this, it's possible. And you have to see how is your flight and how is your railway network organized in your country, and how has it to be changed? Because what we can't have in the future is very short haul flights. Only when we have developed the new e-fuel or H2 airlines and they're in action, but this will take another 20 years. And for the next 20 years, I mean, until it's not maybe to develop these airplanes, but the airlines have to buy it and you have to fuel them. That means also the airports have to have the fuel. All that system has to run. And it's not realistic to say this will happen in 5 to 10 years. This will be a period of 2 decades. And so this is, you have to think about your old railway networks. They have to be strengthened to at least for the next 20 years to improve that from a touristic kind of perspective.
And I think this depends very much on the region that we are looking at. I think in Europe, as Felix mentioned, we have very good options. If I go from Frankfurt to Rome, going by air in the end causes emissions of about 640 kilograms of CO2. If I do the same return trip by rail, we are talking about 20 kilograms of CO2 emissions. You can really see the difference can be very, very immense. I know this might not help maybe the island of Borneo so much because you do not have a rail network connecting you, say, to the mainland of Malaysia. So we really need to look at which regions can do it, and in other regions, we need to think of other alternatives.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, in Sarawak, we don't have any rail system at all. So yeah, we're far away from being able to accomplish that. I want to ask Pei Chin now. Thank you guys. And thank you also, Kamala, for your answers. I want to ask Pei Chin. First, I'm going to say something so that you know what I'm asking about. I noticed that you talked about these, I think I'm using the right term. You said soap nuts, is that correct? And these are, you know, they came from traditional knowledge, knowing that you can use nuts to clean your clothes. I mean, you can use these soap nuts as a natural detergent. And so what I wanted to ask you is, are there any other indigenous practices or indigenous products that that you guys at Warming Up are trying to use when you do the education in the villages?
Yeah, thank you, Madam, for the questions. Yeah, so far the soap nut is the one of the indigenous product that we promote among the local communities. Yeah, other than that, I would say like the how to say the jungle products. Yeah, so because local homestay usually they will cook for the tourists as well. Yeah, so in like for the jungle produce like the foods from the jungles like dabai, if any one of you like know about this one. Yeah, so some of these food product actually we also promoting them to like to deal with that. And other than that, like the one that can be used like bamboo. Yeah, so if like bamboo is plenty in the jungles, yeah, so this bamboo actually they are quite used to build for building their house or building the shelters. Yeah, so this kind of building structure actually is very nice and very beautiful for the perspective of the tourists. Yeah, so actually for this one, because last time they only know how to use it for building the houses. Yeah, so other than that, we also like asking them to why not you guys can try to use it for the bamboo bicycle, since like in the homestay usually. Yeah, so we currently in the R&D progress to build the the bicycles, yeah, using the bamboos. Like they don't need to buy from the town area for the bicycle. Instead, they can build their own bicycle using the sustainable product lah. Because bamboo is also actually one of the kind of like sustainable crops, because the growing stage is very fast, and then the carbon dioxide absorption for the bamboo is very plenty lah, and many compared to other crops. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, that's interesting. It's, you know, you ask a question, you don't know what you're going to get. So I'm really surprised about bamboo bicycles. Wow. Okay. I want to thank all of you. I'm sure you noticed there are such different perspectives, right? You've got global, you've got regional, and then you've got national, and then very small regional, like little villages. So we've been able to see many different perspectives of how to deal with responsible consumption and production, especially, and how to deal with the tourism industry and how it can become more sustainable. So I really want to thank all of you for what you have contributed. And I'm sure everybody here who has been listening has learned a lot. I know I have. And I'm also thankful that you have given your information on all your slides. You have you've shown how to contact. And so I believe that the people who have been listening will contact you if they want to have any more information, or if they want to try to partner with you. Now, there is another thing I wanted to remind everyone, and that is how this is recorded, which means it's not only the people who have been listening to us, but all the other people that joined. Maybe they couldn't join this workshop, but maybe they were very interested in knowing what happened. They will be able to view our video later also. So don't be surprised if you do get some comments, some emails, some other questions besides the ones that we've discussed today. Okay? I want to encourage everyone to try to reach out and network with people all over the, you know, I know we're using a lot of energy, but do communicate with each other and stay connected so that you will be able to learn from each other. And I'm sure there are things that people here that have been in the conference can teach us as well. You know, there are people who didn't speak, but they are professionals and they are experts in so many different fields. So I hope there will be some reaching out in both directions so that we can learn together. I think that's it for today, right? We have gone a bit over time, but I thank you for not running away. Because this was the last session, I thought I could get away with it. I didn't try to control and stop anyone. So I hope everybody has gleaned a lot from the discussion and from the presentations. So I guess that's it from me. Now there is a message that says, what is this? Well, this is for the students, okay. So I think that's it for us, right? I think that's it. One more message. Okay, so that's it. I think we are free to go now. I hope I'm right. Does anybody want, oops, is that right? Yes, that's right. Okay. I was wondering if anybody wants to do all photos. Is that right? But maybe not. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, you guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All the
Goodbye.
best for the rest of the conference.
Oh, here's a good question. Will travel ever be safe?